Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With a WrestleMania week bonus outside the ring WWE edition of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and we have, yes, yet another loaded show for you. On this episode, we will be discussing CM Punk's explosive interview to kick off WrestleMania week. We will also discuss Cody Rhodes' interview, less explosive, but nevertheless interesting, in the middle of WrestleMania week. We will also talk about what happened on the A&E biography of Roman Reigns, and we will do a catch-all with a ton of other items from the world of WWE and a little AEW, all on this episode. Before I welcome co-host Vintage Chris Vanini and get into all of that, allow me to remind you off the top that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So please, folks,
stop being marks for yourselves and go back to being a mark for me.
Go back to being marks for the Silver King, for Vintage, for this damn podcast. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Do not forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. It is also where you can vote in our pre- and post-show polls for NXT Stand and Deliver, WWE WrestleMania 40 Night 1 and Night 2, all of which will be utilized in our instant analysis podcast, 2 on Saturday and 1 on Sunday. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Over head. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio, instant reactions to Raw, NXT, Dynamite, and SmackDown every week, along with exclusive news posts on Friday. Plus, by becoming an official Getting Over head, you are directly supporting the Getting Over Wrestling podcast financially, and we would greatly appreciate it. Before I get to Chris, before I get to everything on this show, I just want to go back over our schedule of podcasts for this WrestleMania 40 week. Already in your feed, you have the WWE WrestleMania 40 Ultimate Preview. You are not going to want to miss that. You also have our NXT Stand and Deliver Ultimate Preview. We will come back Saturday afternoon with an NXT Stand and Deliver instant analysis, Saturday night with your WrestleMania 40 Night 1 instant analysis, and Sunday night with your WrestleMania 40 Night 2 instant analysis. And then on Tuesday, we will talk Raw after WrestleMania, the WWE Hall of Fame, the Slammy Awards, Bray Wyatt becoming immortal, the documentary that is getting rave reviews on Peacock, and we will do a catch-all on anything else that we missed coming out of WrestleMania week. All right, that was a mouthful. Chris, welcome to the show. You are with me just hours before you're going to jump on a plane and go to Philadelphia and make me jealous by attending WrestleMania 40 and all the other events in this given week. How much are you anticipating this experience?
I'm excited. I'm following up on my earlier actions by I have WrestleMania X7 now on my TV as we do this podcast to get in the mood once again. I'll probably be in Philly by the time people listen to this. I got to say, I looked at the weather. It's going to be cold.
Yeah, not great.
So I got to say, I actually have not attended an outdoor Mania before. I've
really?
been to 2 of them.
Interesting.
One in New Orleans, one here in Dallas. So that'll be a new experience. I will be in the press box, so I'll be nice and warm and cozy. But yeah, bundle up, people. And Northeast outdoor shows.
You have, though, correct me if I'm wrong, you have been to an outdoor WWE stadium show, though, no?
No.
Was SummerSlam indoors? That was indoors too?
SummerSlam was indoors.
Okay.
Both WrestleManias were indoors.
Yeah, Ford Field is indoors, obviously. Yeah, that's my fault.
This will be a new experience.
I'll tell you what's interesting. I'm the exact opposite. I've been to almost exclusively outdoor WrestleManias. The only 2 WWE major pay-per-view events that I've been to that were indoors were WrestleMania 34 New Orleans in the Superdome, and then this past year, the Royal Rumble at Tropicana Field. And I'm just going to tell you straight up, outdoor WrestleManias, way better as an experience. The visuals are better. It's much cooler to be there. It feels special. When I was at Tropicana Field, now Tropicana Field also sucks. It is the worst baseball stadium in the entire country. It felt like an arena show. And the Superdome, it was so cavernous. You've been there for college football before, right?
I was at that same WrestleMania 34.
Oh, okay. You were there. It's so cavernous. The sound gets lost the further you get out. Everything was really far away because of the bowl structure, like the way it was shaped.
Yeah.
I did not like that at all.
It's also an old stadium, though.
It's really old. Yeah.
Doing it in AT&T Stadium was incredible because you've got lights galore.
Sure.
You don't have to put pillars up around the ring. I am curious to experience it outdoors for the first time because I actually think WrestleMania is made for indoors because of all the extra things you can do with the production.
Oh, I disagree. I think it's made for outdoors.
See. I've not seen the set. I know they showed part of the set being built. I kind of want to avoid it as long as I can and not see it till I walk into the stadium. I'm probably going to get spoiled by it, but we'll see.
Well, they're going to do the whole reveal Thursday, probably while or shortly after everyone listens to this podcast episode. So yeah, it'll be out there and we'll see it. It does not, I'm not going to say too much. It doesn't look quote unquote impressive from the standpoint of last year's WrestleMania set that was so built out. It seems like
indoors.
It seems like this one's much more screens, like WrestleMania 35. Not as bad as 35. Yeah. This seems much, much better. Let me be very clear. Okay. Much, much better than WrestleMania 35, which was the worst set of all time, as far as I was concerned. It was to the point where, Chris, I walked in to that stadium and I looked at it. I go, I'm not seeing this right. I was in the press box. I'm like, there has to be something else that I can't see. So I left the press box. I went down to the seats to get a better angle. And I'm like, yeah, it's a curved screen with a glossy black stage. That was the worst. Whoever conceptualized that, they cannot be working for the company anymore. I'd be shocked.
Too much screen. Too much
screen, too much gloss. Horrible. We're not here to talk about WrestleMania sets. We're really not even here to talk about your trip, though I do hope you have a great time. And I'm going to be jealous. You know, if you see anything really cool, please send me some text message pictures. Maybe I ask you to get me something. I don't know. We'd have to meet each other for that to, actually work. So you can hand it off to me, but that's another story for another day. We're here to talk about a ton of stuff that has already gone down on this WWE WrestleMania 40 week. And really, we're doing this in the middle of the week. There might be plenty to come before this week gets out. Who the hell knows? But Chris, we're going to start with CM Punk's explosive interview on the MMA Hour hosted by Ariel Helwani. And what I'm going to do here is go through what I found to be the most interesting things that he shared. And please, if there's anything that I mention that you want to talk about before we get to, let's call it the main event of CM Punk's interview, please feel free to jump in, but I just want to make sure that everyone hears as much as they possibly can. So let's get to it. Punk confirmed that he showed up unannounced at WWE in Chicago last May after being invited by Bayley because he bumped into a bunch of wrestlers, namely Liv Morgan, on a plane. So weird how that happened. Vince McMahon did tell Paul Levesque to ask him to leave, and folks in AEW apparently thought he betrayed them by visiting friends from his former company despite having no ulterior motive. Given how many WWE and AEW wrestlers have been at each other's shows, like supporting their friends and stuff, it's kind of sad that that was said about him if it was. Though I guess it's a bit different because he was so staunchly anti-WWE for such a long period of time that maybe they could have felt betrayed. I think that's fair. All the teases on TV had nothing to do with him. He said he never spoke with WWE until 5 days before Survivor Series when Nick Khan called him. He quickly buried the hatchet with Paul, signed the contract backstage before the show, and there was never a non-compete or anything from his AEW exit that would have prevented or delayed him. So WWE could have brought him in right away, but obviously Chicago was the perfect time. He said that debut, it was so loud that he could not even hear Cult of Personality. I believe it, just based on the way that went. And also he had that guy yelling, Chicago, Chicago in his ear. You will obviously remember. As we already knew, Cody Rhodes was planned to win the Royal Rumble, and Punk was supposed to fight Seth Rollins through another method for the World Heavyweight Championship, presumably Elimination Chamber. There was not an audible or anything like that after he got injured to have Cody win. He told Levesque upon signing that he was not back in WWE to steal someone's spotlight or take main events because that happened to him in the past. He just wanted to contribute, have fun, and be a part of the team. He said backstage culture in WWE is completely different from when he left, and he feels partially responsible for it due to his advocacy for change in his career. More laid back, not as cutthroat. I think, Chris, it's fair for him to take a level of credit for that, but I do believe it actually has far more to do with corporate structure, Vince McMahon leaving, and just societal changes, like through one generation to the next. Workers these days aren't going to stand for being treated like they were back when WWE was in the Attitude Era.
Here's the thing. I don't think it was necessarily him leaving that created that. And this is going to be a theme as we talk about this topic.
Mm-hmm.
I think everything he said on Colt Cabana's podcast around Thanksgiving later that year,
that's fair,
is what did it.
Yeah.
When he talked about the Z-Packs and all the concussions and all the stuff, and he got sued by the doctor, I believe, in that. I think that put a greater spotlight on it and led to change.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Yes. And that was, Punk does this stuff sometimes. So yes, in an inadvertent way, I do believe that is part of it. Also, as you said, just becoming a bigger company, corporate stuff, all that stuff as well.
Yeah, he deserves a level of credit, and it's fine for him to take some of it, just not in totality. There's a lot of other things that happened in this world that led to that being the case, you know, beyond just CM Punk speaking on a podcast or leaving the company or talking shit while he was with the company. He said that upon re-signing with WWE, he did see Vince McMahon one time at that Titan Towers gym. They hugged and briefly made good, but he never saw him again after that. He was asked about the allegations in the lawsuit. He said he did not read the suit, but he did read the text messages. And just after reading those, he said, fuck this. He called them indefensible, obviously. Ariel kind of led him to his next answer, but Punk did say the business is better off without Vince. On the segment with Drew McIntyre and Seth Rollins, among other things, Punk said, quote, I know where the line is. I say and I do things to make you say, quote, I know this is all phony bullshit, but that guy was real, unquote. So that's what we talked about very much on that WWE episode, where that segment was so strong, not just because they all shot at each other, but because on multiple different occasions, Punk found the line and then completely pulled back and allowed everyone else to get in. And that is the mark of maturity. Let's just be honest. I don't know if that would have been the case a year ago at the other company. So that is fair for him to say that.
This was the most interesting part of the whole podcast to me. I know we're going to get into the AEW stuff.
I agree. No, I agree with you. This was the most interesting part. I agree.
When he says he's being a hypocrite, but it's interesting because he says all this stuff said about me being a cancer, all these bad things. You know what that means? That means I draw money the next place I go because people want to know what I'm going to do, what I'm going to say. And he's right.
He's always maintained that his whole career.
Yes, that is wrestling completely. However, half of his entire brawl out complaint press conference was that people were saying things about him. You know, so like he doesn't like that people say things about him, but then also, you know, he leans into it and likes it as well. So it was a little bit of like, don't say anything about me. But then I like when people say things about me because then it adds to my aura essentially and whatnot. So it's a little bit hypocritical. A lot of things in this interview were a bit hypocritical, but I thought that was interesting because he's right. And you can see the wrestling mind there.
Yes.
Which goes to this whole interview, which is how much behind the scenes do you really want to know? Or how much should they really reveal? That line, that gray area is the sweet spot. And he, in the ring, in wrestling, has always been one of the best at finding that spot like we did last Monday.
Well, that is exactly what I was going to say. The differentiating factor between what we got on Raw and Brawl Out, aside from the real versus fake aspect of the entire thing, is one was done on television for entertainment, and the other was not. The Scrum was a situation where everyone could let loose, and Punk had a live mic, and he should have been cut off. And it should not have gotten to the point where he would have said that or where the title would have been on him if he felt that way. And yet that was the situation they put themselves in. Here, they were all on the same page. Everyone did exactly what they said they were going to do, unlike what he claims happened with Hangman Page. And therefore, he took it up to the line, even in situations that were not planned. Obviously, the Vince McMahon, trying to get McIntyre to say Vince McMahon. He took it as far to the line as he possibly could and then completely pulled back. He saved Drew because he didn't know what he was going to say. And I don't blame Drew for that at all because he was put in an impossible situation. And the same thing happened with the referee thing where Punk went down, he counted, and it looked like he was going to, not purposefully, but like what he was doing was subverting their plans. And then he's like, wait a minute. Okay, folks, I can't be impartial here. I can't do this. So on two different occasions, he proved out that quote I just read, that he knows where the line is, he's going to go up to it, but he also knows when to pull back. I just thought it was it was exactly what happened in that segment. And I was glad he explained it in the way he did.
And it's why I don't read, by the way, that whole thing, that's why I don't read the dirt sheets, because sometimes I don't want to know.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's more fun not knowing. I don't want to know how the magic trick is done when I go to David Copperfield, you know, like that's my feeling toward wrestling as a viewer, as a fan.
I'm going to give you
and Punk knows that, and that's exactly what he was saying.
I'm going to give you a David Copperfield and magicians. I'm going to break it all down for you. Mirrors. It's just that. It's mirrors everywhere. That's how they do it. Sorry. Anyway.
I saw him in Vegas a couple years ago. He was totally going through the motions. It was still incredible.
Oh, I'm sure it is. I mean, look, I still love magic. I'm not shitting on magic. Let me be very clear. There's that guy, what was his name? Chen Lin on America's Got Talent. Fantastic. But the answer is mirrors, in case, anyone didn't know that. Anyway, let's go back to Punk. Punk said that he is actually going to be healing and coming back quicker from this triceps injury, because not only does he have something to look forward to with a goal in mind, but because it's a different injury and he's recovering better due to WWE's help. He said he did not get anything like that in AEW. And when he got hurt, especially given the circumstances of Brawl Out and everything that transpired, they just ignored him and left him on his own medically for 6 months. He said they paid for it, but they left him on his own to do everything. And all of this, for me, my takeaway was really that it lends credence to the idea that he can get back by Clash at the Castle, like we were alluding to on the, I believe, Tuesday podcast. Now let's talk about, Chris, the part that made news and sent like 100 of you to fill our DMs and replies on Twitter wanting us to talk about this week. The summation of it was this quote, "When it comes to AEW, I genuinely don't regret my time there. I'm just brutally honest about some things." Now, to be more specific, Punk said it was, quote, "completely irresponsible as a company," unquote, to have no one pick him up from All In. He said he does have an NDA from Brawl Out, but did not have one from Brawl In. Regarding the collision incident with Jack Perry, he said he basically had to lay down the law after Perry cursed out a ton of executives backstage because Tony Khan would not do anything about it. He also talked about what happened with Hangman Page going into business for himself, but we've talked about that ad nauseum. We're not going to do that again here. Now, that take on Tony repeated throughout the interview, with Punk saying, quote, "nobody is in charge," unquote, in AEW, and that Tony is, quote, "not a boss. He's a nice guy. Ultimately, that is a detriment to the company," unquote. And he said since Khan didn't handle the Perry situation, when it came to All In, he handled it for himself. Quote, "I didn't punch anybody. I just choked somebody a little bit. Samoa Joe was there, told me to stop," unquote. And that led to Punk saying, quote, "I quit. I told Tony, I said, this place is a fucking joke, man. You're a clown. I quit," unquote. And he also claims, quote, "there was a concerted effort to slander me and kind of ruin my character. That was the genesis of all the drama," unquote. And he dismissed the idea that Tony was afraid for his life at All In because he said he did absolutely nothing to make him feel that way. Now, it's important to remember, Punk is telling his side of the story. This is not unvarnished truth. This is not a third party, who was backstage finally letting it all out and saying what really happened. This is Punk telling his side of the story. And during the interview, he didn't necessarily take the time to see it from the other side. That's what was so refreshing about Becky Lynch's book. She talked at times about being selfish and seeing things one way, her way, but she also acquiesced to the idea that others may have seen it differently. And maybe though she perceived something one way, other people perceived it a different way. For Punk, and this is true his entire career, you know it to be a fact, he's never at fault for anything. He blames everyone else. It's always been the case with him, and that did not change in this interview. But Chris, that's also not to say that everything he uttered was false or without merit. For anyone who is a new listener, I'll remind that you and I have blamed both Punk and Khan for what transpired at Brawl Out and Brawl In. Punk for what he said at the Scrum. Tony for sitting idly by and letting him do it and being embarrassed. And I don't like to use this word, but it's the best one I can come up with right now. He got cooked by the entire thing. He's letting someone else run his company, sitting right next to him, allowing it to happen. We criticized Punk for causing disruptions behind the scenes. We criticized Tony for not being a boss and nipping it in the bud when leadership and management could have prevented it from exploding in the first place. And then we criticized Tony for not firing Punk the first time, bringing him back, giving him his own show, and again failing to handle another situation. And then, of course, blame Punk for putting his hands on Perry and Khan for his reaction to all. And it is the height of absurdity that he actually said in a quote, "I didn't punch anybody. I just choked somebody a little bit," as if that's okay.
Yeah.
As if that's allowed. That is not allowed. That's not okay. Okay. So Punk's story is that Tony is nice, but terrible in every other aspect of his job. That's certainly not true, even if I do have qualms with, let's say, his creative and his booking. But I'd be disingenuous if I disagreed with anything Punk said about Khan as a boss, as far as his talent goes. It was almost verbatim to what I've said on the podcast. Not disrespecting what he's done for the business or talent. He has done a poor job managing his employees and his workers. He's done a poor job managing relationships and controlling the backstage area. Punk and Hangman and Perry and the Elite all played roles, but Tony was the reason everything exploded and was never quashed. And that's not talking about his creative problems or anything else. It's also not giving credit to him for acquiring talent, creating the most successful competition to WWE since WCW more than 2 decades ago, and giving a lot of people in the industry jobs. But again, it was tough to disagree with his assessment of Tony as a boss. Punk also took shots at AEW as a business, but before we talk about that, Chris, I'll let you get in on this.
To your point about Punk's perspective, I'm going to again call back to the Colt Cabana podcast he did, because he said a lot of things in there at the time that turned out to be maybe not fully contextualized or a bit too much. So like a lot of people listen to this podcast like, yeah, Punk, Tony Khan sucks. He's right, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, guys, remember who we're talking about here. So like his perspective.
You mean the interview, not the podcast?
Yes. Well, yes. The interview on Ariel Helwani. And in terms of being a boss, I said this when Punk came back, or at least when he was gone, that AEW had to figure out how to turn Brawl Out into a storyline, into money. It was the number one thing people were talking about. And the fact that they didn't, the fact that Tony Khan couldn't presumably get the Bucks or other people involved or whatever, was a sign that it was not in the hands of the right leadership to make that decision. We have not the same situations, but you have Edge, Lita, Matt Hardy, a real life, cheating love triangle thing going on. What they do, they made that a story. There are so many instances in WWE history where there's a real thing going on, and you know how to turn that into money, turn that into a storyline, turn that into something people are going to watch and people are going to pay to watch. When they kept Punk and decided to keep him away from the Bucks, you knew it was never going to work.
Yep.
You knew there was no plan, that there was no real business plan there. And that was such a letdown. The fact that they could not let that happen. I don't know if legal said they couldn't do it. You guys got to squash that and come together for the business.
And
the fact
let's not forget, I'm sorry,
is a failure on everybody's part.
I'm sorry to interrupt you because you didn't interrupt me, but let's not forget those other guys are executive vice presidents of the company. They're not just talent. Yeah. They're people in management positions. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and that was it. It was an example of why wrestlers, as history has shown, aren't good bosses for other wrestlers when they're active talent.
That's true. And it also showed Tony's naivete, at least managing employees and talent in professional wrestling. Because this was the first big time conflict, Brawl Out I'm talking about, that he had to deal with, and he failed. And then coming up with the solution of not letting Punk go, even though he requested his release, separating the shows, that led, I mean, not necessarily directly because other incidents happened, but that led to Brawl In. If you didn't do that and you didn't split your roster over not just who's going to be on what show, but who likes Punk and wants to work with him and who doesn't and doesn't want to work with him, and you have that kind of chaos backstage, it's never going to work. It might for a couple months, it might for a year. At some point, the bomb is going to explode, and that is exactly what happened with Jack Perry and with Brawl In. Now, besides the criticisms of Tony just as a boss, as a manager of employees, talent, and relationships, Punk also took some shots at Tony as a businessman and AEW as a company. Here's what he said. First, quote, "This isn't a real business. This isn't a business predicated on making money. drawing money, selling tickets, doing business. It's not what it was sold to me as, unquote. Second, quote, their business, it's just not a real business. It's not about selling tickets. It's not about drawing money. It's not about making money. It's just not. I think it's about having good matches, maybe, and there's nothing wrong with that, unquote. And then third, quote, if you're more happy with some goof saying that you had a 5-star match and the building is a quarter full, we're not in the same business, unquote. And look, to a degree, Punk is right about parts of AEW's business. It is certainly not maximizing revenue or seeking clear profit at this point. There is too much of a reliance on high-quality wrestling, as evidenced by their new catchphrase with Restore the Feeling transitioning to Where the Best Wrestle. It's also very similar to Where the Big Boys Play, like back in the day, WCW.
I keep thinking that's going to be said.
And I can't get away from that, but I digress. AEW has legitimate problems as a business, but scoffing at and pushing aside all of AEW and Tony's legitimate accomplishments was asinine by Punk. AEW not showing a profit and not seeking to make money are two entirely different things. This is still very much a startup in that it has not signed a second full television contract. It did sign an extension of its first one, but not a second brand new contract where the first one was on its way to expiring and they got a new opportunity. That's where the money comes in. It has taken them longer than it should to be profitable, but that's also because Tony keeps investing into the company, primarily in talent. Will that work? It's really tough to say because AEW right now, it is even further as a number 2 to WWE than it was because WWE is so damn hot. And the way the number 2 company is successful is when number 1 is struggling and people are looking for an alternative. Right now, people are no longer looking for an alternative to WWE. If Tony just wanted to show profitability, he could. If AEW was just about putting on good matches, they would not have sold 73,000 tickets plus at Wembley Stadium. They would not be getting 120 to 140,000 buys for pay-per-views at $50 a pop in 2024. And they wouldn't be about to sign a new TV deal that will make them profitable. That's what this business is about these days. Media rights revenue. And that's why Tony is signing all these big money deals, because he thinks he's about to get one himself, and paying Kazuchika Okada $14.5 million, if true, over however many years won't matter because they're going to be raking in profits well beyond that. And you know what? He's probably right to a degree. Look, AEW is not going anywhere, and that's good for wrestling. So does Punk have a point about business not being focused right now? Sure, that's fair, especially when he was there. Was it appropriate to suggest they're only about putting on good matches? I don't find that to be fair at all. AEW could already be more successful from a profitability standpoint. It should already be more successful from a profitability standpoint. At the same time, they're going to slam that hammer down on the table pretty soon. And once that happens, I don't really know what criticism there's going to be about them from a business standpoint.
This was the number one thing that if I was involved with AEW at all, I would be so pissed off at Punk about. Calling out the business and how it's run at a time when AEW is working on getting that second TV deal. That's the kind of statement that can put people's livelihoods at risk. And people take a closer look at how certain things are being run and whatnot. And the people in AEW don't deserve that, especially all the workers and everybody who's simply even not an in-ring performer. That was a very low blow that he absolutely did not need to take. And like you said, AEW, and he made the point. I mean, Ariel asked him, Punk, do you think AEW will be around in the future, whatever? And Punk said, as long as Tony is putting money into it, which Tony Khan should be praised for.
Absolutely. That
he is keeping this company afloat, giving people jobs, creating competition so people in WWE can get raises and all kinds of stuff. Like, as someone who, to go back to Hangman Page, workers' rights and all that type of stuff, that should be lauded. And you can be upset about certain things, the way the company is run, especially the healthcare thing, like you said, not getting picked up at the airport in London. Like, there are logistics problems in the company, sure. But to say it's not a business is completely unfair. And I don't think he should have said that. And I can't stop thinking about how much Punk has changed or is just completely flipped from the first time he appeared in AEW. Everything he said about WWE, said it wasn't wrestling. This is wrestling, all this kind of stuff. He was completely the AEW line. And then a couple years later, he's just, no, none of that stuff. WWE guy complaining about guaranteed money for wrestlers like we're in freaking 1995 or something like that.
I think that was exaggerated. I think he was just saying that the old way contracts were structured motivated people to be better. And it gave them it lit a fire under his ass. People took that to mean that he thinks no one should have that these days. I don't really think that's what he was trying to say. Sure. I just think his point was like, look, the way things were structured in the past created a groundswell of effort and enthusiasm and all this. Now, some people can just go to work and get a check. I think that's what he was trying to say.
And Punk knows and needs to keep the perspective that he is a made man and doesn't need to do certain things to get to certain spots. He was once that guy low on the totem pole who needed to work his way up, who needed certain things, who had to put on the 5-star match to get noticed and stuff like that. And he alluded to that a little bit when he said, when people ask me, hey, did you watch my match? You know, yeah, it was a great match, but selling too much or don't sell enough or too many flipping moves or all kinds of stuff. Like, he's very much an old head now. Totally. And sometimes he realizes that, sometimes he doesn't. The last thing I'll say on this part, I talked to Brandy Rhodes on Monday for my story on Cody Rhodes, and I asked her about them leaving AEW, and she wouldn't get into specifics, but one thing she said to me, a quote I put in the story is, quote, what I feared with that company I was seeing before my eyes. When you start to see things drift from the original vision, I've seen this happen before, you start to think this may not be what we thought it was. And that's pretty similar to Punk saying it wasn't what I was promised, essentially.
Cody has said similar things too in the past.
Yes. And so we don't, again, she wouldn't give me details. We don't exactly know in certain ways what that means, but it does highlight that there are business issues.
Yes, absolutely.
Losing Cody, losing Jade, everything Punk said, these are things that need to be taken seriously, but do not come away with this thinking AEW is just some ragtag thing being held together by duct tape. Like that
not at all.
That is not at all the case.
And
Punk portrayed it like that.
And they've also beefed up their corporate structure and hired people that actually have experience now in all these areas that they were lacking. And that's since Punk has left. It was almost like Punk's departure made them all realize, hey, or made Tony Khan realize, because really it's him. Hey, there's all these things that we just haven't had, or people in positions that shouldn't have been in those positions. And it does seem like AEW is picking up a level of momentum. It's getting a bit more consistent, but it's one thing to be consistent and another thing to keep saying, hey, we're consistent. We're the best. We have the best wrestling. And that's kind of what they're doing right now, more of the latter. But we'll get to that, I promise you, in a moment. To wrap up with CM Punk, I'm going to call this a massively entertaining interview. And Punk, to a degree, but certainly not all the way as we just explained. He sounded to me a bit like Howard Stern. And for anyone who's been a longtime listener of Howard, like I have been, it's to the point where he's reached a certain age and gone through enough things in life where he no longer wants to be the one causing waves, but he rather wants to be the person riding them. Now, we all get more mature with age and experience. CM Punk, it's not like he just turned 40. The guy's 45 years old. So it shouldn't have taken him this long to get to that point. But the fallout with AEW seems to not have changed his personality, but changed his outlook and his focus on like what's important and what he actually wants to do. It almost felt like this interview wasn't so much what it would have been 10 years ago on the Colt Cabana podcast, him tearing something down, they suck, F them, all that. It more to me came across like he was exercising his demons once and for all. Like he had someone that was going to ask him the questions. He had a place that he could speak to it. The one area he couldn't, where he signed the NDA, he didn't touch on. He was very appropriate in that regard. And now it almost felt like he is ready to move on. Now, will that prove to be true? Who the hell knows, right? It never has been before. That's just what I took from watching it live. he does legitimately seem to be in a better place now that he's back with WWE. And I also believe he may have learned something from the standpoint of when he left WWE, he thought everything they did was wrong. And with AEW, it was going to be the best parts of WWE plus all those wrong things done the right way. And now coming back to WWE, I think he realized all I really wanted was for people's health to be taken care of and people to be paid fairly and all these things, which is what WWE does now because the culture has changed so drastically over the last decade. So I think his eyes were open to what he didn't actually want was to compete with WWE. He wanted to be in a better WWE. And you know what, Chris? That's not dissimilar from his fan base and the wrestling fans in totality. AEW got so popular initially because everyone was sick and tired of WWE and Vince McMahon and I almost said Bruce Pritchard. Sure, maybe Bruce Pritchard, but Kevin Dunn and all the shit they were getting, the scripted storylines and the short-term stories rather than long-term storytelling, and so on and so forth. And ever since that has changed and the product has gotten better, fans are coming back. They don't need that alternative anymore. And it seems like that's exactly what happened with CM Punk. So I think there's a really interesting parallel there. And it's not just the 150 or 200,000 fans that Punk brings with him wherever he goes. It's just literally the way WWE has changed has made it perhaps so much more attractive and appealing to the group of wrestlers that wouldn't have found it appealing previously.
Yeah, so much of this felt like that Colt Cabana podcast. I still remember Thanksgiving sitting in the back of my wife's parents' car listening to it, thinking I had to pull it up on YouTube because it wouldn't download because it crashed. You know, like it was such a big thing when it happened.
Yeah.
And this is similar, just to a different extent, much more, you know, corporatized and all that. I always said when Punk showed up in AEW and he basically shit on every single thing he had done in WWE. And I said, I don't think I said he's wrong. He accomplished a lot in WWE. He made a lot of new fans in WWE. He became a better wrestler and everything in WWE. He didn't want that perception when he was in AEW. Mm-hmm. Now he's back. Now he seems to realize that is the case. I hate that we've spent 40 minutes here shitting on AEW.
We haven't
during WrestleMania. We're not shitting on AEW, but we're just talking about this because it's. I don't like that he did this. As a reporter, I love having the information. As a fan, I mostly just hated everything he said. I didn't like the idea of just shitting on another company for no reason, just like I hated when he said it about WWE 10 years ago or whatever that was. It's childish, just like the Brawl Out press conference was. And, you know.
Oh, I don't equate it to that. I think you're exaggerating there. This was not the Brawl Out press conference.
No.
He was asked direct questions in a professional setting and answered them professionionally, but he gave you his honest opinion on things. My qualm with it was
he just did it in a more professional setting. Yes.
My qualm, Chris, my qualm was it didn't need to be this week. Yeah. Do this next month. Like, why did it have to be this week?
And look, CM Punk got me back into wrestling. Him and The Rock, 2013, I think that was. That's what brought me back into wrestling. He is such a captivating person. That's why I said AEW shouldn't fire him after Brawl Out, because he's so interesting. And he did that here. That's why people watch him. It's why he is who he always has been. And I will say, we'll probably talk about this more throughout. Ariel Helwani did a very good job of asking questions.
Great.
In this.
Yes. Excellent.
Asked pretty much every single question that needed to be asked. He did. Whether you think he's a shill for WWE, we know his feelings with Tony Khan, whatever. He asked questions that you wanted answers to, and he did a good job with the interview.
It really was an excellent job by Ariel. I mean, not even a question. I don't care what side you're on. Hopefully people that listen to this podcast are not tribalistic, because that's not what we present. And that's why I reacted so strongly. We did not shit on AEW. I think I just defended AEW maybe more than I ever have in a singular podcast.
That's true. I'm more meant talking about people shitting on AEW.
Sure. Well,
not that we were.
Let me go and change the page on that, because we're still going to be talking about Cody Rhodes. We're still going to be talking about Roman Reigns. But something happened, okay, while we were getting ready to tape this podcast that I am going to respond to. And despite the fact that I just said we didn't shit on AEW or Tony Khan, which we did not. We just kind of defended them to a degree. Let me change tone for a moment, because Dynamite starts Wednesday and Adam Copeland hits the ring for a promo segment. He comes down without his title because he said he's there to talk as Adam. That's him. He's there as Adam. I mean, what's the difference? Anyway, what was hysterical was at the onset of this, there was massive feedback on the microphone, which is a reminder that AEW still has audio problems through like 5 years of its existence. I digress. Copeland said, quote, "There's been a lot of negative BS that's been spewed this week," unquote. He looked into the camera and said, quote, "Screw that. There's a whole lot of positives right now," unquote. Copeland said he grew up as a fan of WWF with a brief pause so fans could boo, but they didn't. And he said, "There's no reason to boo." Okay, then why did you pause? He repeated that he loves professional wrestling and realized he needed to end his career in AEW because it has a great roster and he can fight great wrestlers. He said Will Ospreay's name wrong 3 different times. He put over how these are all first-time matches that he gets to have, and said he's telling people in the industry he's having more fun in AEW than he's had in his entire career. That led to an AEW chant from the crowd. Then he said, quote, "I celebrate AEW. I celebrate the men who started AEW." He named some of them. Cody actually got the biggest cheer of the entire segment, and he called out Tony Khan's name too. He said AEW has pushed the industry into a better place, and that should be celebrated. He said, quote, "AEW makes pro wrestling better. AEW makes pro wrestling more fun, and AEW is where the best wrestle. AEW is moving forward," unquote. And you know exactly what that was responding to. Chris, I have been watching wrestling a long ass time. This was perhaps the second most transparent stand up for insert company promo that I can remember. The most transparent, obviously, being WWE back in the day. It was so blatant that Tony tweeted, quote, "It means a lot to hear those AEW chants right now," unquote. And he tweeted the "We're the best wrestle" catchphrase again. I mean, it was almost as if Tony wrote this promo for Copeland to recite. And it was clearly in direct response to everything Punk said. One of our listeners, Shane Howell at ShaneOmac713, he wrote in that it was so sad and it played into the worst instincts of Tony. And he is exactly right. I actually give Tony a degree of credit because he did not fly off the rails on Twitter after Punk's interview like he normally would. But that's really just him acting like he always should have been acting, like an adult, like the head of the company, like the way Paul Levesque acts when AEW takes a shot at WWE. He doesn't. That's the point. But it was quite a sight for him to send Copeland out there and give a rah-rah speech addressing a subsection of wrestling fans on the internet, especially given AEW just released, by the way, like 10 on-air talent this week after promising that was not something they would do. The pander here was out of control. And it was almost as if Tony asked Copeland to do a recruiting pitch through the screen to start trying to get people from WWE to fight back. And I know, Chris, you're going to disagree with a lot of what I'm about to say, but I'm still going to say it.
Yeah.
The same people who are going to cheer this are the ones who criticized Seth Rollins for putting over WWE when he was champion. Worst of all, though, the Copeland promo was lame and it was unnecessary. It was pathetic. As we just discussed, some of what Punk said was certainly true, but a lot of it was just his side. Tony Khan was right to fire him. He should have done it earlier, but he was right to fire him. AEW is having plenty of financial success. That's going to be proven when it signs the new media rights deal, despite some declining ratings and some ticket sales figures that aren't good. Punk is allowed to speak his truth, just like Tony can go do an interview and counter him. He doesn't need to send out talent to speak for him. Go on a business podcast and say as much. Come here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast and put over AEW and how well you are doing. We just told our audience a moment ago, let people like me who have been critical of you clarify that not everything Punk said was fair, just like we did. Hiding behind talent and having them do the talking for you is pathetic. Everyone knows AEW is good for the wrestling business. Opening your own show, addressing what a guy you fired said in an interview was embarrassing as far as I am concerned. And really, Copeland, I'm supposed to believe you've been there for a couple months. You were in WWE for a quarter century, and you're having more fun now than you ever have before. That's how great it is showing up periodically, feuding with Christian Cage and wrestling a couple new people in some pretty good matches. All it really accomplished was showing that Tony was emotionally hurt by what Punk said. This served no purpose otherwise. And I know you disagree, Chris, but this came off so minor league, so late years WCW, to have a former WWE guy come out, eschew anything actively happening in the company's storytelling, and talk about something that already passed through the news cycle. AEW has been around half a decade now. It is time for it and its boss to grow up, stop worrying about WWE, and let their own success do the talking.
Funny, actually, while we were talking about this, Edge showed up on my TV, WrestleMania X7 here. Quite a long time ago, that was. Also, Eddie Guerrero versus Test right now. Eddie Guerrero, he was so freaking good, man. He is one of the best. So, you text me. I had missed this live. You text me, said, hey, Adam Copeland cut a promo. A lot of people are trashing it. Let's check it out before we pod. I go, okay, I'll check it out. And I watch this, and I go, this seemed fine. Like, I had no issues with this. And I do not think you can say Tony Khan sent Adam Copeland out there to talk for him.
He booked it. He put him out there with no storyline reason to defend AEW.
You think there's no chance that Edge saw AEW getting shit on for days and said, hey, as a veteran of this business, let me go out and rally the troops?
I don't believe that. B, even if he said, I would like to do this for you, Tony Khan then should have said, as the boss, no, this has nothing to do with our storytelling. We don't need to address it. And I'm not going to open the show with you doing a 15-minute promo defending AEW. Even if it was Copeland's idea, it was a terrible idea.
See, you made the point earlier where normally Tony Khan would just be completely childish about this and tweet things and yada and all this stuff. And that's one reason why, while I hated CM Punk shitting so much on AEW, it was coming a bit for all the times at various press conferences and scrums and everything that Tony shit on WWE. He did that a lot.
Everything he's allowed to happen on screen, everything he's allowed his talent to say. Yes.
He had this coming back for sure, because he has thrown it the other way many, many times.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a fan of AEW and someone who you were a fan of, probably not you, but like the general, you were a fan of CM Punk, shit on the company that you like, you'd probably feel pretty bad. And I have zero issue with one of the biggest stars in your company coming out and just being positive. Like, yeah, it was cringe, but that's okay. Like it could have been so easy to be like, we're going to take them down or blah, blah, blah. Or it was just like, hey, we got a lot of really good wrestlers here, man. And I'm having a lot of fun. There's a lot of guys I want to wrestle.
Let him go do an interview and say that.
Let's just have wrestling and have fun and do this, okay? To open their first show since this pipe bomb was dropped by CM Punk, and do it in a positive way, I had no issue with this.
Have Adam Copeland call ESPN or The Athletic or CBS Sports and have him do an interview and say exactly that, publish it, and lead that into your show. That's it. You don't open your show with a segment like this. It was so pathetic.
To me, it was just a simple acknowledgement that things were said and that they didn't want to get into.
Why are you doing it on TV? They're bringing it up on television.
Because it's the number one thing that everybody who thinks about AEW is thinking about.
The cycle's over. Then do the interviews. Then go do an interview. Tony, go on a podcast.
Well, if you do,
tell your side.
Speaking from a business perspective, you call someone up to do an interview, you're going to be asked about specific things, and I'm sure AEW doesn't want to get in that tit for tat. They just wanted to move past it by acknowledging it, saying, hey, we're going to be okay. I'm not going to change your mind.
Let me ask you one question.
I'm just saying I had no problem.
Let me end it by asking you one question. I just want you to be straight up honest. Okay?
Yeah.
You're Tony Khan. You're in that situation. Now, you may not have had a problem with Tony did, but you're Tony Khan. Do you open your show with that segment?
If Adam Copeland comes to me and says, hey, I want to stick up for everybody here, talk for 5 minutes, say we're all in this together moving forward, I would have no problem with that. That would tell me, hey, maybe we do have some leadership here in this locker room that the boss may not be providing. That locker room leader is like obviously such cliche crap, but for him to just say positive things about AEW and it coming from somebody who has been in both companies to give it an air of legitimacy.
But that's exactly why he was used for this.
If Will Ospreay had come out and said this, you would have just said, what are you talking about? You've never been
but that's the whole point.
WWE.
They used the WWE guy. That's exactly what I'm saying, though. They took a WWE guy. Guess who didn't do this? Jon Moxley didn't do it. Bryan Danielson didn't do it. It was Adam Copeland, their newest. I guess Mercedes Moné could have done it, but she's not capable of cutting a promo like that. They took Adam Copeland and had him do it and say, "Hey, go do this for us." And again, you're saying you would have been. You're saying you would have been. I'm trying to clarify here. I'm trying to fucking clarify here. You're saying the way you would have been okay with it is if Adam Copeland came to you, and I'm saying, okay, if that's extenuating, consideration to the whole deal, then let me circle it back to you. If Adam Copeland didn't do that, would you have sent a talent out there to go do that?
If I said, "Hey, Adam, go say positive things about AEW to start the show,"
or "Hey, Adam, we want to respond to what CM Punk did," would you go out there and say something? Here's some things that we could talk about.
That I don't know what the way to describe it, but no, I would think that was lame.
Okay, so let's see if we find out some actual information on how this transpired. And as far as your opinion goes, it can help determine that. For me, I feel the same either way. If I am the booker of a wrestling show and this happened on a Monday and it's gone through the news cycle and it does not affect my storytelling, my active wrestlers, and I can talk to them backstage and I can go and step up as the booker, as the owner, and go do an interview with a podcast or go on a show and go tell my side. Maybe I'll go, "Hey, Ariel, I know we had a rough past. I want to come on your show and respond to what CM Punk said. Or I want you to ask me questions similar and I'll answer them." That's what I would do. I wouldn't go start my television show where I'm entertaining people and trying to tell stories and do good business. And I wouldn't start that by having a former WWE guy go out and cut that promo.
That's fair. I
think your opinion's fair too.
I understand why they didn't want to let CM Punk necessarily set the narrative and just react. Just give it a 2-minute, 3-minute positive promo to acknowledge and say, "We're moving on. We're not dealing with that anymore." I thought that was a good idea.
If he had done this on WWE TV, if he had done this on WWE TV or at a press conference after WrestleMania, I would agree with you. He didn't. He did it in a third-party media interview, and that's where the response should have come from. A third-party media interview. That's what I'm trying to say.
Well, third party with an asterisk. Let's say.
I mean, look, you can say that they don't have a relationship. Yeah, Ariel interviews a lot of WWE people. He brought Tony on before any of them.
Yeah,
he did.
No, Tony doesn't do that anymore. He doesn't do Busted Open anymore.
Tony commented for an hour and a half on Ariel's show.
That was not a good look.
He didn't have to do that.
He's got a call on Friday before Ring of Honor, so I'm curious how that'll go. Yeah,
I think he'll no comment stuff. Again, we said what we had to say Wednesday is what he's going to say. But look, let's move on. I like that we had a heated argument. We
haven't argued this much since Yellow Gatorade.
Yeah, but this one was like real. Like, I liked that. There was some fire back and forth between you and I. That doesn't happen in a long time. It's also late. Let's talk about some other shit. Let's get back to WWE, okay? I think you agree with that. I know you agree with that. All right, let's talk about Cody Rhodes' appearance on Ariel Helwani's MMA Hour. Far less controversial. I'll run through it, same as what I just did, and you break in, I should say, if there's anything you want to talk about. Cody equated Final Boss Rock to Hollywood Hogan, and that fans are being surprised with a dominant new character from a guy that they thought they'd already seen everything from. Hulkamania in Hogan's case and the General Rock character in Dwayne Johnson's case. I found that to be a really astute comparison by Cody, quite accurate. It's just, It's great on its own, but even greater because it's another gear we did not expect. Another astute observation from Cody is that the same people who are booing Rock now are actually Rock fans. They're folks who in almost every other case, we said this on the podcast, would love to see Rock and Roman Reigns, just not this case, not this year. Cody said he got advice from John Cena the day after WrestleMania 39, largely because he didn't have his dad there to talk to. And he said Cena told him, be the champion without the belt, which is what he spent the last year doing. Cody kept kayfabe when he was asked about not winning WrestleMania 39. He said the two lines that bothered him during that build were Roman saying he couldn't get over in his own company. His popularity is one of the reasons why AEW was started, and that he would run away if he lost. I only mention this due to the irony of what Reigns said in his A&E biography, which we'll talk about in a moment. He said, quote, "I owe it to them to finish the story," Cody did. He also said he has to beat Reigns to make it true that there's more than one royal family in wrestling. I'll interject a quote from First Take. He said, quote, "If I don't finish the story, I might as well move over to commentary at that point. If I lose again, I feel like you lose your faith," unquote. Let's pause here, Chris. I think these are the most clear indications for him to go that far.
Yeah.
Where it's like, look, we're not going to screw you again. Do you feel the same way?
And that First Take quote was, he was saying, if I lose again, I will lose the faith of the fans.
Right.
Is what he was saying. Fans won't do this another year.
Which is true.
Yep.
It's exactly what we talked about on Tuesday. Cody was angry at the mix. This is so funny. He was angry at the mix of real and AR pyro from the 2023 Royal Rumble win. I cackled at this because he cares about pyro so much. Of course, fake pyro would bother him. It was hilarious. And Ariel didn't catch on to that. I wish he did because it would have been really funny. Cody said post-show press conferences are fun for him, which is the opposite take that CM Punk gave. He said he hates them. And Cody said the presser with Jey Uso was a top 10 career moment, which is pretty cool. Cody said Paul Levesque has been an incredible guide and mentor. He never could have expected that after he broke the throne and poked at him other ways in AEW. Cody talked about potentially following in Triple H's footsteps one day, watching what he does backstage. Cody countered what Becky Lynch said about Seth Rollins not knowing about Punk's return until it happened. He said what was reported that they were told beforehand. He disagreed with Punk's assessment of AEW and Tony Khan. He named all the individual executives. He said how proud he remains of what they created and what it means for the industry. And he also said that it's a startup company and the infrastructure was still being built and is to a degree still being built, all of which we just talked about. Cody said there was no consideration to going back to AEW before he just recently re-signed with WWE. Not winning at 39 was disappointing, but he's still exactly where he has always wanted to be, doing exactly what he's always wanted to do. Cody said what The Rock whispered to him was extremely touching, but he heard it as a negative because he was so upset about what was happening in reality. Cody said in wrestling, you have to lead the audience. You can listen to them, but you can't completely listen to them. Otherwise, things get too chaotic. But the fans were way too loud in the We Want Cody movement, and Paul was the one who made the pivot. He also says what we are witnessing on TV right now is far more compelling than anything that was ever planned. He said Brandy Rhodes will be at WrestleMania in a visible way, and it's going to mean a lot to him. Quote, "That woman got hugely scapegoated, just misinformation. Everyone knows who they are that was involved in it. For how she was treated after the departure, it pisses me off to this day," unquote. And he also put over Gunther, Sami Zayn, and Becky Lynch in a major way. It was great to see Cody talking real and just giving honest answers. He kayfabed a little where he felt like he had to. Otherwise, he was just open. Ariel again asked really good questions. Again, not as controversial or interesting as the CM Punk interview, but I would highly recommend everyone go and watch this.
I love Cody Rhodes, man. Like, I think I relate to him more than any wrestler I've ever seen. And it's because we're pretty close in age. I'm 34, he's 38. But like, so we have like similar things. His favorite match of all time is Rock versus Hollywood Hogan. That's the same for me. Hating the AR pyro and those little details ruining everything for him. I'm the same way with that too. And I talked to him last Saturday for my story, and off the cuff, he just starts talking about he's going to have it's in my story, but he writes quotes on his weight belts for big shows. Last year's show, he wrote down all the independent promotions he worked for between WWE. This year, 2 nights, one's going to have a Garth Brooks quote he wouldn't tell me. The other's going to have a Yoda quote from The Last Jedi.
Oh my God. Right up your alley. Not anywhere near mine.
Yeah.
Not anywhere near my alley.
We are what we leave beyond. We are what they leave beyond, or something like that. And he's like, I know people don't love that movie. I'm like, yeah, I don't love that. Of all the Star Wars, I don't like that one. We start talking about that. And it's like, he's so engaging and thoughtful. And for a guy who, looks like $1 million, looks like a robot sometimes, he's done Ariel's show a couple times. And I've loved every second of both of them. They're just really good interviews. He knows when to kayfabe and when not to. And you can kind of tell he still has that respect for the business, which I respect. And man, like the story I wrote is all about how he left WWE, bet on himself, thought he could be the guy, came back and proved that he's the guy. And I think just anybody can relate to that. And I think that's why he survived the last year. It would have been easy to lose that heat after what happened. And it's 100% a credit to him and the connection that he has made with fans for the last 10 years, really, on the independents, AEW, and now here, that he's in this spot. And that's why we're all rooting for him. He is so popular, The Rock turned bad guy. Like, that is insane.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so cool that he's in the spot. Obviously, we hope he wins. I think he's great, man. Like, legit, he's like our generation's, guy who we can like. I don't have many like pro athletes who are like that. Like, now we're getting Super Bowl halftime shows that are like catered toward our generation.
Yeah.
And now we have kind of one of those pro wrestlers too. And I loved him on, on BTE, the Elite, and all that stuff. That's where I really got to see him, and to see him now, I think it's cool. And I'm kind of just rambling here, but Cody's awesome, man. He really is.
The unique thing about Cody, and we'll wrap on this, at least with this section of the show, is he hits all corners. Like, Roman Reigns was forced down our throat. Now we love him because of what he changed, and we'll talk about that in a moment. John Cena was organic to start. Then they turned him babyface, and they refused to move from it because he sold titles and he sold merchandise, and kids loved him, and he did Make-A-Wish. And eventually he was forced down our throats way too much. And look, it's possible that 2 years from now we feel the exact same way about Cody, but there's an authenticity about Cody that those other guys didn't have. It's similar to the reason that Drew McIntyre's recent heel turn is working so well. It's because Cody left this company. He bet on himself. He succeeded. While doing so, he gained fan support, not just because he was a Rhodes and not just because he left WWE and was striking it out against the man. He was entertaining. Being the Elite was fun when he was on it. A lot of the things he did in New Japan were fun. Cody showing that other side of his personality, embracing the American Nightmare, the character that he had built, starting a rival promotion. These are all things that we experienced with him. And now he's back in WWE actually chasing the dream. This isn't a storyline. It's legitimately real life. And it's happening on screen. And that is why there is so much support for Cody beyond the fact that people like him as a babyface, which he is a very good babyface, especially in WWE. But it's all working out. It's all hitting this crescendo. And we go into WrestleMania, and we already talked about it on the Ultimate Preview. Chris, they just gotta land the plane.
He gave me a great quote. I'll finish with this that I put in the story, and that is, he said, if he ever saw Dusty again, or if he saw Dusty in a dream, and he explained everything he's done over the last 10 years, he thinks Dusty wouldn't understand the decisions he made, but he would get it. He said he wouldn't like that I wore tights. Mm-hmm. He would absolutely hate the neck tattoo. He thought I should be a movie star. But then when when he saw I'd be main eventing 2 nights of WrestleMania, he'd get it. And I thought that was really sweet. And it's a real life story, man. I've always said that all this finished the story. It's basically its own story now, but we all remember, we all know what it really means. And it's something anybody can relate to and root for.
Yeah. He also, by the way, explained that Michael Cole coined that phrase, not even him. So yeah, it's pretty interesting as well. Let's move to a breakdown of the A&E biography on Roman Reigns. This, Chris, was unlike any of these biography episodes that I can remember. I haven't seen them all because I lost A&E. I know you did as well when we moved over to YouTube TV. But you may say, well, look, it was different because Roman Reigns is different and he's an active superstar. He's on a 3.5-year title reign. That's all true. But there was a lot of kayfabe from Roman where I hoped he would just be explicitly real throughout the entire 90 minutes. Instead, he was real for a lot of parts, but also kayfabe for some other parts. And that's okay. It was immense overall. It's a definite must watch. I love that Paul Heyman, at least in the kayfabe-ness of the documentary, was behind camera asking Roman some of the questions at least. Mm-hmm. That's usually the director's job. Probably should have known this, but I did not realize his mom was Italian. That explains the Samoan bloodline with the mafia-style influences that we've seen in Bloodline, primarily the aesthetic going into last year's WrestleMania 39.
Wait, are you just saying just because he's Italian, there's a bit of mafia in him? I'm taking offense to that as an Italian.
No, I think it fits the dynamic of what they're doing with the group. It's not a purely we're just Samoans group and we're family, so we're all together. It's him lording over them like a boss. That character is not like we've ever seen from a Samoan before in WWE. It has some of that Italianness in it. And if you don't believe that, you go have a problem with Tony D'Angelo. He'll straighten you out pretty damn quick. I can tell you that right now. I'm sure it popped you like it popped me that Chan Gailey and Calvin Johnson were in the dock for at least a moment. I thought that was pretty cool. None of it was really surprising, but Roman did not want the Shield to break up, and he did not want to be a babyface. Glad that they clearly pointed out the holes in his game and why it was so problematic. I did get a chance to see some cutscenes from the documentary. I don't know if you watched after it ended, Chris, when I sent you the link. One of them was the promo battle with John Cena. I wish they had left it in. Another thing was Corey Graves explaining Roman's name. It was originally going to be Roman Reigns, Rains, but Corey apparently suggested it be Reigns, which is so damn obvious, yet crazy that it was not going to be that initially. Wild. I can't believe they didn't leave that in. I'd love to ask him about that one day. Seemed like a huge missed opportunity not to talk about Reigns being offended by Philly booing his Royal Rumble win, given they're going back now in the main event. They covered it on the doc. I'm saying in storyline, WWE television.
I can't believe they haven't.
They had this whole thing set up. They booed him there. The Rock raised his arm. Now they're coming in together as teammates. How is that not part of the build? That's absolutely. Cody could have used it. Roman could have used it to needle the fans. Really weird.
Yeah, like Roman just start like on Monday, or maybe he'll do it on SmackDown. We'll see. But like Philadelphia, I hate you.
Yeah,
you ruined my life. And you get that going in that he's got nuclear heat as he comes out for the first time. It's so easy. It's right there.
Yeah. How about Philadelphia acknowledge me? They do that, and then they boo him. So he goes, "Good, I hate you." And then you don't remember Royal Rumble, whatever that year it was, 2015, what you did to me, the high point of my career with my cousin by my side. Like, boom, it's right there. I cannot believe they missed that opportunity. I digress. Yeah. Loved the moment after WrestleMania 31 where Heyman told Reigns that no one carried him in the match against Brock Lesnar. He actually held his own. Talk about a confidence booster. You know what I mean?
Well, it's Paul Heyman before they were together.
Well, there's another one too. Heyman was also the second person to hug him after the leukemia announcement. It was Triple H and then Heyman. So, it's one thing for him to say, I've been with and near the family this whole time, but they proved it out as part of the biography, right?
Yeah. Well, they didn't talk enough about Heyman's past history with the rest of the family, which I was kind of surprised at. Did you have anything else on this?
Yeah, a couple more. I always assumed as much, but Reigns confirmed that he's still taking leukemia medication to this day and that it does mess with his body. That certainly explains the far lighter schedule from an in-ring standpoint. Doesn't necessarily change the aspect of him being absent for long stretches as champion, not being on television, obviously. The doc did make it seem, this was my biggest issue with it. It made it seem like between Seth Rollins cashing in and Reigns losing to Brock Lesnar 3 years later at WrestleMania 34, that he beat The Undertaker, but was otherwise unsuccessful. He had 3 WWE championship reigns in that stretch. That was really odd. It would have been far more compelling for them to show him being elevated, yet still not being cheered through all of that success. Reigns saying he was ready to retire during the pandemic. That was not a line, in case anyone was wondering. That's 100% fact. I've heard that multiple times in the early going of the pandemic. He had this quote, "If I'm not number one, I don't want to be here." That's what we mentioned and alluded to earlier. And last, my only last take, I'll let you get in. I didn't realize until the end that The Rock was not part of this. I know he's a busy guy, but literally everyone else was in this doc. I'm sure that he could have found an hour to sit down for an interview or something. For me, that was a glaring omission. You're doing a biography of Roman Reigns and The Rock isn't in it. That was odd.
My main takeaways, one, by the way, if you don't have A&E, like if you have YouTube TV like us, you can still watch it on the A&E app on Roku. That's what I did.
Free?
It's like one day later. Yeah, free.
Oh.
Just one day later, it's online for free.
Didn't realize that.
Same thing with Dark Side of the Ring. I've done so just for future reference for everybody. I mostly thought this was boring. There wasn't like these massive ups and downs and stuff. It was just like this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. Obviously, the leukemia part was one, but it was just like this and this and this. And he's not an emotional guy when he talks, so I thought it was mostly kind of boring. And it was also a reminder of knowing how good Tribal Chief has been, just how bad it was for so long.
Yeah. Roman, you mean,
With
specifically.
him as champion. Yeah, it was we thought back then we thought he looked uncomfortable. It wasn't quite working. But now that you see it working, it looks even worse in hindsight, man. And they gave this guy WrestleMania main event after main event after main event after championship reign. And it was not working at all. I cannot believe they stuck with it for so long. Like in hindsight, and that it really was not working. Thank God he made the heel turn. It has completely changed him, his legacy, and the history of WWE. Really, you look at the way he, even early on as the bad guy, as the Tribal Chief, the way he would talk was so different than everything he did as a babyface. Also, the goatee looks so bad.
Terrible.
The beard is such a better look. Is such a better look.
One of the reasons, I mean, there's a million reasons I want to interview Roman Reigns, but he and I made the same transition from goatee. I had the same goatee as him to full beard, but like lined up. And I'm not saying I'm some handsome dude like Roman. Roman obviously is, he's a celebrity and women love him and all that. But the way I look at myself now and then pictures of myself with just the goatee, I cannot believe I walked around with that for so long. Holy shit. And it was like, almost like Vince McMahon wanted him to have a little edge, but not enough edge, which is what a full beard does for you. You know what I mean? He looked terrible. And the veneers also helped, by the way. Like,
and the tan.
The hair, it changed the structure of his face. He got older. The gray helps now. He looks, acts, and sounds night and day different. The lack of confidence he had during that time. That's why I wanted them to play the Cena Reigns in ring segment that they cut from it and any reaction to it, because that really exemplified like, oh my God, this is terrible. The other thing I realized is they did play the part where he does suffer and succotash. I forgot the entirety of that line. I just remembered that he said those two words. Listening to it back, it was almost like someone wrote that for John Cena and had Roman Reigns deliver it. And that's why it was so bad. Because Cena could have made it work, because that's how corny he is. A guy like Reigns shouldn't be corny. And yet he said that, and it just came across so poorly.
Yeah, no, it's. I just, again, cannot believe how much time they wasted. I don't say wasted, but just like forced it.
I know.
When it wasn't working. WrestleMania 31, 32, 33, I think was The Undertaker. 34 was New Orleans. 35 was McIntyre early in the show.
Return from leukemia.
And then the pandemic, and then he becomes the bad guy.
Yep.
Like, man, imagine if this had happened 5 years ago. Who knows? But they figured it out, man. And he is a legend. It is weird. I think he's going to main event WrestleMania like 9th time or something like that.
He's going to tie the record Saturday and break it Sunday.
Yeah. Which I kind of put an asterisk on that with 2 nights. But
bullshit.
But that's crazy.
Yeah.
Here I'll say this. When you think about the greatest wrestlers of all time, biggest stars in WWE history, like, does Roman Reigns hit your top 10?
Top 10?
Yeah.
Biggest stars? Well, just off the top. If you're saying stars, right? Like just pure star, then I would say Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Rey Mysterio, Hulk Hogan.
I don't know if I'd say Rey Mysterio.
Rey Mysterio is a massive star.
I thought you were going to say Stone Cold Steve Austin or Hulk Hogan, and that's
Rey Mysterio is a massive freaking star. More people know Rey Mysterio than you think.
You said him quicker than I expected.
Okay, I'm not doing it in order. I'm just giving you. I'm thinking. Those three, obviously, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage,
Piper,
Ric Flair. If you count Ric Flair, Roddy Piper,
Undertaker, Shawn Michaels,
Yep.
Like, I don't think Roman Reigns makes your top 10, which is interesting.
Is Triple H 10? Does that get us to 10? Just 10?
Yeah, that's 10-ish. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know that he's top 10, but I think the fact that we're having a discussion that he's top 10 all time in this era of WWE, and you know what? We could be underselling him. Business does pick up drastically when there's a reason why when he goes away for TV for 4 months and they say Roman Reigns returns to TV, like, and it's a big deal and ratings go up 200, 300,000 views just when he shows up. I mean, that's not, an accident. By the way, CM Punk can get thrown into there. He does have a pretty damn big following.
Yep.
I wouldn't put him top 10 all time, but he's right on the outside.
I just think I think it shows that they figured it out late.
Unfortunately.
It may be too late for him to be one of the greatest. If this really is close to the end of his run, a couple more years of part-timeness, you just think, man, if we hadn't wasted those 5-6 years of trying to make him a bad guy. But Roman Reigns is going to go down with a 1,300 day reign, the most main events of WrestleMania ever.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it won't totally feel like that.
He's also the champion when WWE got its biggest media deals. They made their most money. The company got sold,
But we'll never, he will not be on the level of Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Hulk Hogan, despite having accolades
correct
in ring that are there, if not better. So it's just, it's an interesting comparison as we think about his legacy now toward the end and what he's done versus what really clicked.
But now that he is who he is, though, maybe he will get some of those outside opportunities that The Rock got. And maybe in 5-6 years, we're talking about him differently. I don't think we're going to, because I don't think he has the range that Rock had, obviously, or has. But maybe he does cross over more than we expect, and we do start talking about him as one of the biggest stars.
One other thing I'll say about him is we still haven't gotten the face turn that we think
we may not.
We will get. We may not get it now at this point. Yeah. But we always thought once they turned him face again,
oh my God, yeah,
he would be on that level.
Oh yeah.
But we may not get that now. I don't know. Is he instead going to go down as one of the top villains in WWE?
See, that's a better conversation. I think he might be a top 5 villain of all time.
He could be. I mean, you think Piper, you think Triple H, you think Mr. McMahon, the Iron Sheik, that type of stuff. Yeah, he might be in the top villain category. But I just think 10 years from now, are people going to be in oh man, I can't wait to pull out the video game and have so-and-so new wrestler against Roman Reigns, I
do think so. You know what? I actually do think so. Certain situations, bigger guys. Yeah, I think we're in the moment. And that's something that's being missed by a lot of people. Yeah. And we didn't get to say this on the Ultimate Preview. I'm glad that I'm circling back to this. I didn't really mean to. But, they say when you're in high school, for example, or in college, that you don't know you're in the best times until you leave them and you look back and say, man, those were the best times, right? I don't think we right now recognize that this era of WWE is going to do for a lot of fans what the Attitude Era did for us. And I'm talking post-pandemic, pretty much the entirety of Roman's reign coming into what we think will be Cody winning the title here at WrestleMania 40. These are those times. We're living on a week-to-week basis. We're doing this podcast. We're talking for what some people believe is some of the best wrestling they've ever seen in ring. Definitely some of the best wrestling that's ever been done. And what we've said on this podcast is the greatest wrestling storyline of all time. And we just say it as if we're being flippant about it. Oh yeah, it's the greatest. No, this is actually happening. It's remarkable. And we're living it. And I want to take a step back and appreciate it. So I'm glad you kind of brought up a topic where I could do that.
Yeah. And it fits what we said in the preview when Roman said, appreciate it. We said we do appreciate him.
Yeah.
So much so that we want more of him. So
just not as champion after WrestleMania 40, at least for a short period of time.
Yeah. So if Cody wins like we think, I am extremely curious where he goes. Does he take a long time off? Does Rock stuff happen next year? I don't know, but it feels like we probably only have a couple more years of Roman Reigns wrestling. And I'm very, very curious to see what they do with it.
Let's end on that note. I did say that we were going to talk about WWE Speed on this episode, but we went way longer than Chris and I expected. Not a surprise, given this is the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. We'll cover WWE Speed on Tuesday. We'll do the Raw after WrestleMania, WWE Hall of Fame, any extraneous items that we didn't get to cover. We'll talk Bray Wyatt being immortal. We'll talk the debut of WWE Speed. All of that coming up Tuesday on our next regular WWE episode. Let me also remind all of you what's already in your podcast feed and what's still to come from the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. This week, your WWE WrestleMania 40 and NXT Stand and Deliver Ultimate previews are awaiting your ear holes right now if they have not been given to those shows already. Coming up Saturday afternoon will be your NXT Stand and Deliver Instant Analysis. Saturday evening, your WWE WrestleMania 40 Night 1 Instant Analysis. And then on Sunday night, your WWE WrestleMania 40 Night 2 Instant Analysis. You are not going to want to miss any of those shows. On the way out, allow me to remind you that Getting Over
is all about Defy.
So head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Getting Overcast for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. It is also where we will post pre- and post-show polls for NXT Stand and Deliver and both nights of WWE WrestleMania 40. We want your input, and those polls, the results from those polls, will be part of our instant analysis episodes. Please also remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month or $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. You will get bonus audio, instant reactions to Raw, NXT, Dynamite, and SmackDown every week, along with exclusive news posts every single Friday. Again, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Vintage is about to catch a plane for the city of brotherly love. The Silver King is about to catch some shut-eye because we recorded this on Wednesday night. So for him, this is the Silver King signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.